He had expected to find his mother in a safe home, surrounded by the comfort his money had built for her over the years. Instead, he found a rusted shack trembling against the wind by the riverbank, as if it had been forgotten by the world itself. Inside, a woman sat wrapped in thin layers, her body weakened by time and neglect, yet when she lifted her eyes, he recognized her instantly as his mother. She whispered his name like a memory she had been holding to for years, but when he stepped closer, fear replaced relief in her face, as if his arrival itself was dangerous. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The river was loud that evening, but not loud enough to drown what he was about to see. He stood at the edge of the muddy path, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the damp ground, as he stared at the structure in front of him. It wasn't a home, it barely qualified as shelter. Rust had eaten through the metal sheets, leaving uneven holes patched with whatever could be found. The wind moved through it like it owned the place. His breath tightened. This was not what he had imagined when he sent money back home for years. Not what he had believed his brother had been managing. He stepped closer slowly, each step heavier than the last. The door hung slightly off its frame. When he pushed it open, the sound of metal scraping against metal cut through the air. Inside, the space was dim and cold. A small figure sat near the back wall on a worn surface that looked more like discarded material than anything meant for rest. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her head lifted. Recognition hit him like impact. "Mom," his voice broke without permission. Her lips trembled. She tried to stand, failed, then forced herself upright with visible effort. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. That was not the reaction he expected. Not tears, not relief, fear. He moved closer, scanning the space. No heating, no proper furniture, no sign of the support system he had paid for. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rising. "Where is the house? Where is everything I sent money for?" Her eyes dropped immediately, like the question itself was dangerous. Before she could answer, she shook her head sharply. "Don't ask that here," she said quickly, "please." He froze. "Don't ask what?" Her hands trembled as she reached for his arm, not pulling him in, but stopping him from going further into the shack. "If your brother finds you here," she said quietly, voice breaking at the edges, "I'm gone tomorrow." The words didn't make sense at first. He stared at her, searching for clarity, for logic, for anything familiar in her face. But all he saw was exhaustion and something deeper, fear that had been living inside her for a long time. He turned slightly, as if expecting to see someone outside already watching them. The river wind pressed harder against the shack, rattling the loose metal panels. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine grew louder, approaching slowly along the gravel path. Her grip tightened for a second, and then she whispered something that made everything inside him go still. "Please, don't let him see you here." The headlights appeared against the riverbank just as she said it. The headlights cut across the riverbank before the engine even stopped. The sound came first, slow and deliberate, like the car didn't want to be there but knew it had to arrive anyway. Inside the shack, the mother stiffened immediately. Her hand tightened on his wrist with a force that surprised him, fragile but urgent at the same time. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The fear in her eyes said everything before words could form. He instinctively moved closer to the door opening, blocking her from direct view, but he could feel her shaking behind him. The river wind pressed against the rusted walls, making them creak in uneven rhythm, like the structure itself was warning them. The headlights paused just outside the bend of the path. Whoever it was had not yet stepped out, they were watching. Then she whispered, barely audible, "He doesn't come alone." That sentence landed heavier than anything else so far. He turned slightly, confusion tightening his chest, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Instead, she looked down at the floor, as if the answer was buried somewhere in the broken metal beneath them. Her breathing grew uneven, shallow, like she was trying to decide whether staying alive in this moment was even worth the risk. Outside, a car door finally opened. Footsteps followed. Slow, controlled, familiar in a way that made his stomach tighten before his mind could identify why. He stepped closer to the doorway, just enough to see past the edge of the rusted frame. A figure appeared in the glow of the headlights. It was his brother, No urgency, no surprise, just a calm, almost practiced stillness, as if he had known exactly where to find them before he even arrived. He adjusted his coat slightly, looked toward the shack, and let out a quiet breath that almost resembled disappointment. "You really brought him here," the brother said, not loudly, not angrily, just certain. The mother took a step back inside the shack, like the walls themselves might protect her from what came next. Her eyes darted between both men, and for the first time, she looked less like someone hiding a secret, and more like someone trapped inside it. The son stepped forward slightly, placing himself fully between the shack and the approaching figure. "What is going on?" he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried pressure. "Why does she think she needs permission just to see her own son?" The brother didn't answer immediately. He studied him for a moment, then shifted his gaze toward the shack, toward the rusted structure, toward the woman inside it. Something in his expression changed, but not into guilt, into calculation. "You shouldn't have come without talking to me first," he finally said. "That's not an answer." A silence stretched between them, broken only by the river and the faint hum of the car still running behind him. The brother took one step closer, stopping just outside the reach of the shack's shadow. "Do you know what happens when someone like her leaves the system we set up for her?" he asked calmly. The son frowned. The mother flinched at the word. The brother nodded slowly, like he expected that reaction. "Care arrangements, housing rotations, medical oversight. The accounts you've been funding for years." He paused. "You think that money was going to a house with a white fence and someone checking in twice a day?" The son's jaw tightened. "I know exactly where that money was supposed to go." "Supposed to," the brother repeated softly. "That's the problem." The mother suddenly stepped forward, voice breaking through the tension. "Stop," she said. It wasn't loud, but it cut through both of them. "Both of you stop." For a moment, neither man moved. The wind filled the gap instead, slipping through the broken seams of the shack. She looked at the son first, her eyes heavy with something like exhaustion rather than fear now. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to see it the way it really is," she said. "Not yet." His expression softened slightly. "See what?" But before she could answer, the brother spoke again. "Everything she has right now," he said carefully, "is under review." That word changed the air. The mother went still. The son turned sharply. Under review by who? The brother exhaled. By the Trust Oversight Group. There were inconsistencies, withdrawals that don't match care reports, addresses that don't align with approved housing locations. He paused. Someone had to step in. The son's voice dropped. "Step in or take control." The brother's eyes didn't move. "Protect." The word sat there, uncomfortable and unfinished. The mother shook her head slowly, like she had heard this version of the truth too many times already. "You always call it protection," she said quietly. "Even when it hurts people." The brother didn't react to that. Instead, he looked past her into the shack, scanning the inside like it was part of an argument he was building. "You don't understand how unstable this setup became," he said. "You were sending money blindly, no verification, no structure. I had to stabilize it before everything collapsed." The son stepped closer now, anger rising under control. "You stabilized it by putting her here?" The brother finally met his eyes directly. "She chose distance from the main property. That was documented." The mother laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Documented," she repeated. "You make it sound so clean." The son turned toward her. "Did you choose this?" She hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer could. Then she whispered, "I chose not to fight anymore." The silence that followed felt heavier than the river itself. The brother exhaled slowly, almost relieved that she had spoken, even if it wasn't in his favor. "We can fix this," he said, softer now, "but not like this. Not with him arriving and disrupting everything." "Fix this?" the son repeated, his voice sharpened again. "You're talking like this is paperwork." The brother looked at him. "It is paperwork. It's legal responsibility, it's liability, it's years of financial exposure if this gets interpreted the wrong way." That was the first time the word liability landed like a blade instead of a concept. The mother stepped forward again, this time closer to the edge of the shack. Her voice dropped. "You both need to understand something," she said. "I am not what either of you are trying to manage." Neither spoke. She continued, slower now. "One of you thinks I am something to rescue. The other thinks I am something to control. and neither of you asked me what I actually needed." Her words didn't rise, they didn't need to, they filled everything. For the first time, the brother looked away, and in that brief shift, the son noticed something on the brother's phone as it lit up in his hand. A notification, a name tied to a financial oversight account, a review status marked as pending escalation. Before he could ask, the brother quickly turned the screen off, but it was too late. The shape of it had already changed the room. The son stepped forward. "What are you not telling me?" The brother looked up slowly, and for the first time since arriving, his calm cracked just slightly. "Because if this escalates," he said quietly, "none of us are going to like where it ends." The brother didn't move right away. He stood under the glow of the headlights like he was waiting for the moment to settle into something he could control again. The river wind pushed against his coat, but he didn't react to it. His attention stayed locked on the son, then briefly on the mother inside the shack, as if calculating which version of the truth would hold best under pressure. The son broke the silence first. "You said escalation," he said. His voice was lower now, controlled but sharp. "What exactly are you talking about? What is she being protected from, and why does it sound like a threat every time you say it?" The brother exhaled slowly, not irritated, not defensive, more like someone tired of explaining something no one wanted to accept. He stepped closer, just enough to be heard clearly over the river. "This isn't just about her living situation," he said. "It's about exposure, financial exposure, structural exposure. If external review continues, everything tied to her care agreement gets reopened." The son stared at him. "You're not answering the question." "I am," the brother replied calmly. "You just don't like the answer." Inside the shack, the mother shifted slightly. The son felt it without even looking back at her. Her presence was no longer passive. It was part of the conversation now, even in silence. The son stepped forward, closing the distance between him and his brother. "Start from the beginning," he said. "No more vague language, no more protection narratives. Tell me what happened to the money." For the first time, something flickered in the brother's expression. Not guilt, not regret, frustration. "You think money just disappears," he said. "It doesn't, it moves, it gets redirected based on conditions, medical oversight, housing compliance, risk assessment." The son let out a short breath. "Stop talking like a report." A pause. Then the brother nodded slightly, as if conceding the point. "The accounts you were funding," he said more directly, "were never meant to go straight into personal access. They were routed through a managed care structure. That structure required verification, updates, documentation." He glanced towards the shack again, and over time those requirements weren't met consistently. The mother's voice came from inside, quiet but firm, "Because I wasn't allowed to see them." Both men turned slightly toward her. She had stepped closer to the doorway now, but not fully outside. Like she was still deciding how much of herself was safe to expose. The brother responded first. "That's not accurate," he said. Her eyes didn't leave him. "You changed who I could speak to." A silence followed that neither man immediately challenged. The son looked between them. "What does that mean?" the brother finally answered, but more carefully this time. There were coordination changes, third-party transitions. It was to streamline care. The mother shook her head slowly. "It was to make sure I couldn't challenge anything." The river wind grew louder for a moment, pushing through the gap between them. The son felt something shift internally. Not just anger anymore, structure, pattern. Like pieces of a system he had trusted were being pulled apart in front of him. "You isolated her," he said quietly. The brother's jaw tightened. "I stabilized her environment." "That's not the same thing." "No," the brother said. "It's not. Because one sounds emotional, the other is operational." The son stared at him. "You reduced my mother to an operational problem." The brother didn't deny it. Inside the shack, the mother stepped fully into the doorway now. The light from outside hit her face directly. It made her look smaller than the son remembered, but her voice was steadier than before. "I didn't need operations," she said. "I needed honesty." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the son asked something quieter, more dangerous. "Where is the money now?" That question changed the air again. The brother looked at him for a long moment, not immediately answering, not immediately deflecting either. When he finally spoke, his tone dropped. "It's not sitting in a personal account," he said. "It's held in compliance reserves tied to ongoing review." The son frowned. Review of what? The brother hesitated. Just long enough to matter, of whether the original structure was ever valid under the conditions it was created. The son blinked once. That doesn't make sense. It does, the brother said, if documentation is incomplete, if consent cannot be verified beyond dispute, if oversight flags inconsistencies. The mother let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but it carried no humor. So now I don't exist clearly enough to count either way. The brother didn't respond to that. The son looked at her then, really looked. Not just as a situation, not just as a victim in a system. As a person standing in something that had been built around her without her voice in it. What did they tell you when this started? He asked gently. She hesitated. Her hands tightened at her sides. They told me I was being moved temporarily, she said, for evaluation, for adjustment, for better access to services. Her eyes lowered slightly. And every time I asked to go back, she added, they told me it wasn't ready yet. The brother interrupted quietly, because it wasn't safe yet. The mother looked at him sharply. Safe for who? That question didn't get an answer. Instead, the brother's phone buzzed again. He checked it quickly this time. His expression changed, just slightly, but enough for the son to notice. The son stepped closer. What is it? The brother didn't answer immediately. He turned the screen slightly away instinctively, but the son's caught enough, a message thread marked with a formal oversight header and a status line that had shifted. External audit initiated, the son read aloud before the brother could hide it fully. The brother closed the phone. That shouldn't have triggered yet, he said under his breath. The mother stiffened. Triggered what? The brother looked up slowly. For the first time, his controls slipped into something closer to urgency. Someone escalated the file, he said. The son narrowed his eyes. Who? The brother didn't answer. Instead, he looked past both of them toward the river, as if expecting something to arrive there too, and quietly said, now it's no longer contained. The son didn't move for a moment. The words hung in the cold air like something unstable, like they might collapse if anyone breathed too hard. Not contained anymore kept repeating in his mind, but the meaning kept shifting every time he tried to hold on to it. His brother's face had changed completely now, the calm structure gone, replaced by something sharper and more alert, like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was no longer predictable. The mother stepped fully out of the shack. The wind hit her directly, but she didn't retreat. Her eyes moved between both men, slower now, as if she was measuring how far things had already slipped beyond her control. What did you do? She asked quietly. But the question wasn't aimed at one of them. It was aimed at the system that had been built around her without ever including her voice. The brother shook his head once. I didn't trigger it, he said. Someone upstream did. That means an external party reviewed the structure and flagged inconsistencies in the care funding chain. The son narrowed his eyes. And you're acting like this is normal. It is normal, the brother replied. When oversight systems detect risk. Risk to who? The son shot back. The brother didn't answer immediately. That pause said more than anything he could have spoken. Inside the shack, the mother suddenly walked toward a small metal shelf near the wall. Her movements were slower than before, but deliberate now. She reached behind a worn container and pulled out a thin folder wrapped in faded plastic. The son noticed it immediately. She had not mentioned it before, and in a place like this, anything kept hidden carried weight. The brother noticed it too. That shouldn't be here, he said sharply. The mother held it closer to her chest. It's all I was allowed to keep when everything else was transitioned, she said. Her voice carried a quiet bitterness now. Even the words you used made things disappear. The son stepped inside the shack for the first time since the confrontation began. The air felt heavier inside, not just from the structure but from what it contained. What is that? He asked. She hesitated, then handed it to him. The folder was thin, worn, clearly handled many times but never fully opened in one place. Inside were printed summaries, stamped forms, and fragments of financial tracking records. Not complete documents but enough to show patterns, names of institutions, adjusted addresses, repeated authorization lines with inconsistent witness notes. And one thing stood out more than anything else. Multiple entries marked manual override approval. The son frowned. Who approved this? The brother stepped closer. That's what we're trying to determine now. The mother shook her head. No, she said quietly. You're trying to determine who gets blamed. The son looked up from the papers. You knew about this? She didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, she nodded once. I saw pieces of it, she said. Not all of it, just enough to know that every time I asked for clarity, I got a different version of my own situation. The brother exhaled sharply. That's not accurate. She turned toward him. It is. You just didn't hear it from my side. The river wind grew stronger, pressing against the shack again, as if the structure itself was reacting to what was being exposed inside it. The son flipped through the folder more carefully now. There were gaps, missing entries, entire time blocks where financial tracking stopped being detailed and became aggregated summaries. That wasn't standard oversight. That was intentional consolidation. His voice lowered. Someone compressed the record history. The brother stepped forward quickly. That's a technical necessity when care structures are merged across jurisdictions. The son looked up. Or when you don't want anyone seeing what happened between those merges. Silence again. The mother suddenly sat down on the edge of a broken wooden crate inside the shack. Not from weakness, but from exhaustion. I stopped arguing about it when I realized every correction made things worse, she said. Every time I pushed back, the system adjusted around me instead of with me. Her hands tightened slightly. At some point, I wasn't being moved for care. I was being moved to fit the records. The son felt something shift inside him. Not just anger now, recognition of scale. This wasn't a single decision. It was a structure that had evolved without her input, layer after layer. The brother stepped back slightly, looking toward the road again. We need to secure this situation before anyone else arrives, he said. The son frowned. Who else would arrive? The brother didn't answer immediately. Then his phone buzzed again. This time he didn't hide it quickly enough. The son saw the notification clearly, compliance field team en route. The son looked up sharply. Field team? The brother's voice dropped. External auditors don't just review documents. They verify physical conditions when risk thresholds are crossed. The mother stood again immediately. So now I'm a condition? No, the brother said quickly. You're the subject of review. That's worse, she replied quietly. The sound of another engine approached in the distance. Not the same as before, more controlled, more official. The son stepped toward the edge of the shack doorway, peering out. 2 vehicles were coming down the river road now. Not fast, not rushed. That made it worse. The brother ran a hand through his hair, something breaking through his earlier control. If they log this location as non-compliant exposure, everything resets, he said under his breath. The son turned to him. What does that mean? The brother hesitated. For the first time, his voice lost its certainty. It means they freeze all active structures tied to the trust until full reconstruction review is complete. The mother looked between them both. And where do I go during that? No one answered immediately. The vehicles were closer now. Headlights sweeping across the riverbank again, illuminating the rusted edges of the shack like it had been exposed under a harsh inspection light. The son closed the folder slowly. His decision was forming but not fully shaped yet. You created a system, he said quietly, looking at his brother, and you lost control of what it was doing to her. The brother met his eyes, and if I hadn't built it, he replied, there would be nothing left to review at all. The moment held. Then the first vehicle stopped. A door opened, and a voice called out from the darkness near the river edge, calm and procedural. We're here for the structured compliance verification. The voice from the darkness near the riverbank was calm, almost clinical, as if it belonged more to a procedure than to a place where 3 people were standing on the edge of a collapsing family truth. 2 vehicles had stopped just beyond the bend, headlights cutting across the rusted shack like it had already been marked for inspection. The words structured compliance verification hung in the air, and nothing about them sounded like a request. The son felt the shift immediately. This was no longer just a conversation between siblings. It had expanded into something external, something that now had its own momentum. The brother's posture tightened, his earlier control replaced with a sharper focus, like a man trying to stay ahead of a system that had already started moving without him. Inside the shack, the mother didn't speak. She simply stepped back, deeper into the small space, as if distance from the doorway could make her less visible to whatever was arriving. A woman in a dark jacket approached first from the lead vehicle. She held a tablet, not a clipboard, and scanned the environment before speaking again. Two others followed behind her, maintaining a professional distance. "We are here to confirm the current living conditions tied to flagged care accounts," she said. The son stepped forward instinctively. "Flagged by who?" The woman looked at him briefly. "Internal oversight escalation triggered through financial anomaly detection," she replied. Her tone didn't shift. "We're not here for interpretation, we're here for verification." The brother exhaled slowly, stepping into their line of sight. "There's been a misunderstanding in timing," he said. "The situation is already under corrective management." The woman didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked past him directly at the shack. Her eyes adjusted slightly, taking in the structure, the condition, the proximity to the river. "Corrective management is what triggered this review," she said. That sentence landed heavier than anything else so far. The son turned sharply toward his brother. "You told me this was internal." "It was," the brother said quickly, then corrected himself. "It is," but the uncertainty in his voice was now visible. Inside the shack, the mother moved again, this time picking up the thin folder she had shown earlier. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped outside fully. The wind hit her immediately, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she walked slow toward the group, holding the folder in both hands. The woman with the tablet adjusted her stance slightly. "Mom," she said, "can you confirm your current housing arrangement is voluntary and understood under your care agreement?" The mother gave a faint, tired laugh. "Voluntary," she repeated. "That's a word that changes shape depending on who writes it down." The brother moved closer. "Please don't escalate this emotionally," he said quietly. She turned her head slightly toward him. "You already escalated it when you stopped listening." A brief silence followed. Even the river seemed to dull under it. The son stepped between them again, but this time his attention wasn't on his brother, it was on the tablet in the woman's hand. "What exactly are you verifying?" he asked. She tapped the screen once. "We're confirming whether recorded financial allocations match verified living conditions of the named beneficiary." The son frowned. "And if they don't?" She hesitated for the first time. "Then the account structure is suspended pending full reconstruction review." The brother's expression changed immediately. "That's not necessary yet," he said. "We are in active correction." The woman looked at him. "Correction implies prior compliance," she said. "We're still establishing baseline validity." The mother's grip on the folder tightened slightly, her voice lowered. "Baseline validity," she repeated. "I've been reduced to a condition again." No one answered her. The son turned toward the shack behind her, then back to the group. Something inside him was shifting now from reaction to decision. "I want full access to the record," he said. The brother snapped his attention toward him. "That's not how this works." "It is now," the son replied. The woman with the tablet studied him for a moment. "You are an authorized related party?" "I am her son," he said firmly. She nodded once. "Then you can submit a formal access request, but interim exposure is restricted during active escalation." The brother stepped forward quickly. "Do not initiate parallel access," he said under his breath. "It will complicate containment." The son looked at him sharply. "Containment?" The brother didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said everything. Inside the mother's folder, a page slipped slightly as the wind moved through it. The son noticed something printed near the top of one sheet, a reference line, not a full name, not a clear institution, just a coded structure identifier and a notation about manual override lineage review pending cross-verification. He reached out and took the folder gently from her hands before she could stop him. She didn't resist. The brother's voice dropped. "You're not seeing the full context." "I'm seeing enough," the son said quietly. The woman with the tablet stepped slightly closer now. "We will need to temporarily secure all related documentation for audit integrity," she said. The son didn't move. "No," he said. It wasn't loud, but it was final enough that even the wind seemed to hesitate. The brother turned toward him sharply. "You don't understand what you're interrupting." The son finally looked at him directly. "Then explain it without hiding behind systems and terminology." A pause. Then the brother said something quieter than everything before it. "If this audit confirms procedural misuse," he said, "everything tied to her care structure will be dissolved and reconstructed under external control." The mother's face changed slightly, not fear, recognition. The son noticed it immediately. That sounds like you lose control, he said. The brother nodded once. Yes, that single word shifted the entire meaning of everything so far. The woman with the tablet looked between them. We are going to proceed with document capture and system trace validation, she said. The son looked down at the folder in his hands, then at his mother, then at his brother, and for the first time since arriving at the river, he made a decision that wasn't reactive. He stepped back slightly. No, he said again, but this time he wasn't refusing them. He was choosing something else. You don't take this folder. The woman paused. Sir, compliance requires. I'm initiating direct preservation request, he interrupted. Full documentation secured under independent review until I can verify what was done to her. The brother stared at him. That will trigger escalation. The son didn't look at him. It already has. The river wind rose again, and the tablet in the woman's hand suddenly changed screens. Her expression shifted for the first time. We have a secondary match, she said quietly. The brother turned sharply. What match? She hesitated, then looked directly at the son. Your name has just been linked to an internal override signature in the same care structure. The son felt the words hit before he fully understood them. A linked override signature, his name, in the same structure. For a moment he didn't react outwardly. He just stared at the woman's tablet, waiting for the system to correct itself, as if this was some kind of administrative error that would resolve if given a second. But the screen did not change. The brother noticed it too, his face tightening in a way that suggested he had not seen this detail coming either. That's not possible, the brother said immediately. His voice was lower now, controlled again but thinner. There must be a system mapping error. The woman didn't respond right away. She simply tapped once more, then turned the screen slightly so both men could see. Lines of structured data appeared, not emotional interpretation, not commentary, just linked identifiers, timestamps, and access logs tied to the care structure they had been arguing over since the river confrontation began. The son stepped closer without realizing it. His chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the growing sense that the ground beneath this entire situation was not just unstable. It had been layered incorrectly from the beginning. I've never touched this system, he said firmly. The woman nodded once. We are not confirming intent. We are confirming linkage presence. The brother turned sharply. This is why external audit processes are dangerous at this stage, he said. You are pulling unresolved historical metadata into live escalation. The son looked at him. Stop talking like that. Just tell me what it means. For the first time since the vehicles arrived, the brother hesitated long enough that it felt like truth was trying to form before language could catch up with it. It means, he said slowly, that your identity appears in legacy authorization pathways tied to earlier phases of the same care structure. The mother's voice came softly from behind them. Earlier phases, she repeated. No one looked at her immediately. The son did. She stood just outside the shack now, holding onto the doorframe as if the structure was the only stable thing left in the conversation. Her eyes weren't on the tablet anymore. They were on him. You said earlier phases, she continued quietly. What does that mean for him? The woman with the tablet responded carefully. It means historical authorization overlap must be reviewed before final classification. The brother exhaled sharply. This is getting misinterpreted, he said. Legacy systems sometimes inherit identifiers during structural consolidation. The son turned to him immediately. So you're saying my name is inside a system I've never interacted with? The brother didn't answer directly. That silence was enough. A second vehicle door opened behind them. Another figure stepped out, this one older, carrying a compact terminal device instead of a tablet. He walked with the familiarity of someone who had done this kind of verification before, too many times to be surprised by anything. He scanned the scene once, then looked at the mother. Can you confirm your full care designation history? He asked. The mother gave a small, bitter laugh. My what? Your assigned care structure lineage, he clarified, including transitional authorities. The son stepped forward again. She's not a structure, he said sharply. The man looked at him briefly. That is not the classification being evaluated. The brother rubbed his forehead once, like he was trying to hold together something that was starting to fracture. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. We are dealing with administrative trace overlap, not identity conflict. but no one looked convinced anymore. The mother finally let go of the doorframe and stepped forward into the open space between them all. Her voice was quieter now, but steadier. "I've spent years being moved through systems I didn't choose," she said. "And every time someone like you says structure or trace or desmation, I lose another piece of what I thought my life belonged to." She looked at the son directly now. "And now you're telling me even he is inside that language?" The son didn't answer immediately, because something inside him was starting to form a pattern he didn't like. He turned back to the woman with the tablet. "Show me the exact linkage," he said. The brother immediately interrupted. "You don't have clearance for raw trace data." The son didn't look at him. "Then give it to me anyway." A pause. The woman hesitated, then tapped her screen. A new layer opened. Not detailed explanation, just a visual mapping of linked identifiers across the care structure timeline. And there it was, a line connecting the mother's care record history and his name, not as an active participant, but as a prior structural reference node embedded in early authorization templates. The son felt his stomach tighten. "That doesn't make sense," he said quietly. The older auditor stepped forward slightly. "It does," he said, "if your identity was used as a reference anchor during initial system configuration." The brother turned sharply toward him. "That's not relevant without full context." The auditor didn't look at him. "Context is what we are here to establish." The mother stepped back slightly, as if the ground itself had shifted under her understanding again. "So what are you saying," she asked slowly, "that my situation was built around someone who wasn't even involved?" The auditor hesitated, then answered carefully. "We are saying your care structure may have been initialized using a legacy identity marker that has not been properly resolved in current system audits." The son stared at the screen again, his name there, not as a decision maker, not as a controller, as something embedded earlier than his awareness. He turned slowly toward his brother. "You told me I was not involved," he said quietly. The brother's jaw tightened. "You weren't involved in execution," he said. "That's different." The son stepped closer. "But my name is in it." The brother didn't answer immediately. That silence was the first real fracture. The mother suddenly spoke, softer now. "If his name is in it," she said, "then what does that make him to this system?" No one answered her, because the answer wasn't procedural anymore. It was personal. The auditor looked down at his device again, then paused. "There is one more pending linkage," he said quietly. The son looked up immediately. "What?" The auditor turned the screen slightly, and this time the son didn't need anyone to explain what he was seeing, because beside the structural record containing his name was another identifier that had just finished resolving, linked to the brother, and marked under a classification header that had not been active until now. Primary structural initiator. The son didn't move. The words on the screen seemed to float instead of settle. Primary structural initiator, his brother's designation. His name tied to legacy authorization. And now something worse, something undefined, still loading, still forming beneath layers of system data that no one had fully explained. The river noise felt distant suddenly, like it belonged to another place entirely. The brother stepped forward immediately. "This is corruption in the trace mapping," he said quickly. "Too quickly. You're looking at cross-linked identity residue. It doesn't mean operational involvement." The son finally looked at him, really looked. "You've been using my name," he said quietly, "not a question." The brother shook his head once. "Not like that." The mother stood between them, her face pale but steady. "Then explain it in a way that doesn't change every time the system speaks," she said. The auditor held up a hand, stopping them both. His voice was controlled, but there was something different in it now, less procedural, more careful. "We are no longer dealing with a simple compliance review," he said. "We are dealing with conflicting origin authorization signatures." The son frowned. "Origin?" The auditor nodded. "Initial system design inputs. Before active care execution. Before financial routing was stabilized." The brother's jaw tightened. "That layer is irrelevant to current conditions." "It becomes relevant," the auditor replied, "when the origin signature matches an active participant in the present structure." Silence fell. The mother stepped forward slightly. "You're saying my situation was built using people who are now inside it," she said slowly. The auditor didn't confirm it directly, but he didn't deny it either. The son felt something cold settle in his chest. So what are you saying, he asked, that I was part of designing this? The brother snapped immediately. No, too fast again. The son turned to him. Then why is my name inside it? The brother hesitated. That hesitation was new. He had controlled everything so far with language, structure, distance. But now something in the system had removed his ability to frame it cleanly. You were never meant to be active in execution, he said finally. Only referenced. Referenced for what? The brother looked away for a moment, then back. Validation structure. The mother let out a slow breath. That doesn't sound like a person, she said quietly. The son felt his hands tighten. Start explaining clearly, he said. No system language. The brother nodded once, as if accepting a shift he couldn't avoid anymore. When the Ketker structure was initially modeled, he said, it required anchor identifiers. Trusted internal references. People connected to the beneficiary's financial lineage. It was used to validate legitimacy across transitions. The son shook his head slightly. So my identity was used as proof of stability for her care system. Yes, the brother said, and I never knew. No, the brother admitted. The mother looked between them, her voice quieter now. And what about him? She asked, turning slightly toward the brother. What was your role in that same structure? The brother didn't answer immediately. The auditor stepped in again. The current designation identifies him as primary structural initiator during migration from legacy framework to managed care system. The words landed differently this time. Not abstract, not procedural, personal. The son turned slowly toward his brother. Primary initiator, he repeated. The brother exhaled through his nose. That's a classification label, he said, not a moral description. The son stepped closer. You built the system she is trapped inside. I stabilized it, the brother corrected. The mother shook her head slightly. You both keep using that word like it makes everything smaller, she said. No one responded. The wind shifted hard against the shack, making the metal groan. The auditor glanced at his device again. We have a second phase resolution trigger, he said. The brother stiffened immediately. That hasn't been authorized. It has now been activated externally, the auditor replied. The son narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? The auditor hesitated just slightly. It means the structure is preparing to reclassify all linked parties for final accountability segmentation. The mother took a step back. Accountability for what? The auditor looked at her. For origin discrepancies and downstream control impact. The son felt his stomach tighten. You are turning this into blame classification. The auditor shook his head. We are separating origin responsibility from operational outcome. The brother's voice dropped. This is exactly why external escalation is dangerous. It reinterprets intent through fragmented data. The son turned to him sharply. Intent doesn't matter if the outcome destroys someone's life. That sentence hit harder than the rest. Even the brother didn't answer immediately. Inside the tension, something new appeared on the auditor's device, a notification that made him pause mid-scan. He frowned. This wasn't in the initial file set, he said. The brother stepped forward. What wasn't? The auditor turned the screen slightly. A secondary attachment had just been decrypted under the same structure lineage. Label: Pre-authorization identity mapping. The son looked at it, and felt something in his chest shift again. Because there, beneath the structured codes and timestamps, was something simple enough to feel almost wrong in its clarity. A scanned entry. Not a financial record, not a care authorization. A family linkage document. The mother stepped closer without speaking. The brother went still. The auditor zoomed in slightly, carefully, as if even touching it too directly might destabilize it further. And then the name appeared. Not the son's, not the brother's, but a third identifier that had not been referenced in any of the conversations so far, marked as original beneficiary designation holder. The mother whispered without realizing it. That's not my name. The auditor didn't look away from the screen. It matches the earliest version of your care structure origin file, he said. The son looked at the brother immediately, and for the first time, the question wasn't about money, it wasn't about systems. It was about identity at the center of everything they had been trying to stabilize, control, or explain. Who is that? The son asked quietly. The brother didn't answer. Because his silence this time wasn't hesitation. It was recognition. The son didn't speak for a long time. The wind off the river had settled into something quieter, but it didn't feel calmer. It felt like the kind of silence that comes after something irreversible has already started moving. The auditor's screen still showed the linked structure, but it no longer felt like data. It felt like exposure. The brother stood slightly apart now, not fully stepping back, not fully stepping forward either. For the first time, he looked less like someone controlling a system and more like someone realizing the system had grown beyond him. The mother broke the silence first. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. No one answered immediately. The son looked at her, really looked at her, not as a case file, not as a structure, as a person standing at the edge of something she never asked to be part of. Then he looked at the auditor. "What does transparency actually mean in practice?" he asked. The auditor hesitated. "It means full disclosure of origin design, financial routing, and all active authority layers, followed by reassignment of control mechanisms." The son nodded once. "And who decides that?" The auditor met his eyes. "External review board." The son exhaled slowly. Then he turned slightly toward his brother. "And you?" he asked. The brother didn't answer right away. For the first time, there was no system language ready in his voice. "I built what I thought was stability," he said finally, "not control." The son shook his head slightly. "You made decisions about her life without her voice in them." The brother's jaw tightened. The system was designed to prevent instability. The mother let out a quiet breath. "You keep saying that like instability is worse than invisibility." That landed differently. Even the brother didn't respond immediately. The son stepped forward slightly, holding the folder tighter now. "We're not continuing like this," he said. "No more hidden layers, no more indirect authority. If anything tied to her life still exists in those systems, it gets rebuilt in a way she understands." The auditor studied him for a moment. "That requires formal restructuring request initiation." "Then initiate it," the son said. A pause. The brother looked at him sharply. "You don't understand what that will do to everything tied to legacy structures." The son turned. "I understand exactly what it will do. It removes control from systems that failed her." The river behind them moved slowly, carrying nothing visible, but everything felt like it was being carried anyway. The mother took a step forward. "I don't want destruction," she said quietly. "I just want to stop being rearranged without being asked." That sentence changed the tone of everything. The son looked at her again. His voice softened slightly. "Then we rebuild it with you in it," he said. "Not around you, not over you." The brother looked down briefly, then back up. Something in his posture shifted, not surrender, but recognition of consequence. "If we dismantle the current structure," he said slowly, "there will be audit fallout, financial reversals, system exposure across all linked parties." The son nodded. "Then we deal with it." The auditor stepped in slightly. "You are requesting full structural dissolution of the existing care framework?" The son didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." A long pause followed. Then the auditor lowered his device slightly. "Request logged." The brother closed his eyes briefly, just for a second. When he opened them again, something in him had changed. Not resolved, not healed, but no longer resisting the fact that this was now moving beyond him. The mother looked between them. "What happens to me?" she asked. The son answered first. "You choose," the brother added quietly, almost reluctantly. "Under new structure review, you will be the primary consent authority." That word, consent, hung in the air differently than all the others before it. The mother didn't respond immediately. She looked back at the shack behind her. Small, rusted, rebuilt, not safe by any official measure, but real in a way nothing else in the conversation had been. Then she looked at the river. "I don't want to go back to being moved without understanding why," she said. The son nodded slowly. "So we don't move you like that again," he said. The auditor began typing. "Initiating transitional stabilization protocol for independent placement with informed oversight." The brother watched silently now, not interfering anymore. A few minutes passed. No dramatic sound, no final collapse. Just the slow procedural ending of something that had been running underneath their lives without consent. Eventually, the auditor spoke again. "Initial restructuring approved pending full review completion." The son exhaled slowly. Not relief exactly. More like release of pressure that had been building for years without him knowing where it came from. The mother stepped back into the shack briefly, then returned holding the thin folder again. She didn't hand it to anyone this time. She kept it. "I want to understand all of it," she said. Not pieces. The son nodded. We will. The brother looked at her for a moment longer than before. Then he spoke quietly. I didn't see it as this, he said. I saw it as protection. She looked at him, not with anger now, with something more complicated. I know, she said. That was all. The river wind softened slightly again, but nothing felt lighter, just clearer. Later, when the vehicles began to leave, no one said much. The auditor closed his device. The systems that had been active no longer felt present in the same way. Not gone, just no longer directing the moment. The brother stayed behind for a few seconds longer than the others. Then he looked at the son once. I didn't plan for it to become this, he said quietly. The son replied just as quietly. Most things don't start that way. And then he left. The mother remained standing at the edge of the shack for a long time after everything else had gone quiet again. The river kept moving, unchanged by any of it. The son stood beside her without speaking, not trying to fill the silence anymore. For the first time, nothing was being decided over her without her hearing it. The shack stayed behind them. The river didn't forget anything, but it didn't speak either. It just carried everything forward, whether anyone was ready or not. Tell me what part of this ending stayed with you the most, or how you would have chosen to resolve it differently.